If you spent any time absorbing political takes on social media, you've probably at some point or another found someone referencing the PMC, or professional managerial class, and who they support and who they oppose, why they like one thing and dislike another thing. However, in all likelihood, you've rarely come across people willing to concretely explain what they mean when they say professional managerial class. This is because, subconsciously or consciously, the people making these analyses are aware that if they did that, it would immediately reveal their assessments to be, in whole or in part, rubbish. Not to worry though, in this video I will be completely clear in what I mean when I say professional managerial class. PMC is a sociological category created in the 70s to describe a new class of people that didn't fit neatly into a Marxist understanding of class, i.e. proletariat versus bourgeois or worker versus owner. The PMC is essentially a class of university or college educated managers and trainers who are employed by owners to get the most out of their workers. Given this definition, their intended relationship with the working class is obvious, and the following jobs being listed as professional managerial class should be no surprise. The wiki article on the PMC goes on to list these 7 professions or categories of profession: academics, teachers, social workers, engineers, managers, nurses, and middle-level administrators. One objection I'll get to this definition is the hours of work or their pay can make these people actually count as traditionally proletariat. That's a lengthy discussion for another time, but your class is determined by your material relationship to production, not your specific circumstances. Elon Musk isn't a pro when he claims to work 120 hours a week, and a business owner who doesn't take a salary but barely breaks even isn't a pro either. Now, given those listed professions count as professional managerial class, we can get to the real meat of this video, which is determining which of the presidential candidates in the US Democratic primaries has the strongest support from the PMC. Now, of course, we're not going to get polling on support levels listed by profession, but there are other means of figuring this out. We can do what most people do, which is make determinations by looking at the aesthetics of the candidates themselves. Warren and Buttigieg, despite having different policies, both share a sort of academic or professional aesthetic, with both being alum of distinguished universities, while both put a lot of emphasis on expert planning and technocratic decision-making. In contrast, both Biden and Sanders project a more rough-around-the-edges, blue-collar working-class image, again, despite having very different policies. Another thing we can do is to look at the policies themselves, which also carry an aesthetic tone. Biden appeals to the conservative, no-nonsense, instinctive voters who might see new programs as being flashy and unreliable, while Bernie puts strong emphasis on wealth redistribution from the most powerful down to the little guy with his democratic socialism. In contrast, Warren's policies seek to uproot corruption in a system perceived as being otherwise meritocratic by making plans to break up large companies. Buttigieg proposes proposals that are allegedly targeted to address problems with a surgical, light touch. It's through these aesthetics and ideological assumptions about their policies that most come to the conclusion that Warren and Buttigieg must be the candidates with the strongest support among the professional managerial class. And generally, this is where people's analysis starts and stops, perhaps with some sprinkling of anecdotes of what they see people post on Twitter. However, despite how obvious this might appear on the surface, this method in figuring out who has more PMC support is in no way concrete. What is concrete, however, is FEC filings on donation figures, and they tell a different story than one might otherwise assume. These are the people that care enough about their candidate that they're willing to donate to their cause, so we know that their support is strong. So to do this, I'm going to be taking an Open Secrets article about the profession breakdown of donations and who leads where. This article is titled Sanders or Warren, Who Gets More Support from Working Class Donors? Published in September. To answer the question this article poses, it's Sanders. But given his donation lead, it does not preclude saying something else that is also clear in this article as one goes through the list of the profession. This video is going to be showing a few pie charts to illustrate what I'm saying, and the slices are colored like the names are as they've been shown here. So let's look at the 7 listed subcategories of the PMC as defined by the wiki article I previously referenced and who they donate to. Academics. Warren leads donations from academics, but only narrowly. She leads in professors, librarians, and scientists, and comes a close second to Bernie with researchers. Buttigieg is a consistent third. Teachers. This almost goes without saying, given the recent union militancy, but Bernie clearly leads among them, alongside educators in general. Now, there are those who might object to the notion that they are PMC, but that's been discussed, and trust that this little quibble is going to become increasingly irrelevant. Social workers. Sanders leads here, and it's not particularly close. Notably, Warren does lead with a close second for Buttigieg among psychologists, with Bernie with a noticeably, but not that far behind, third. The lead with social workers here is large enough that this can be mostly put aside as being a Sanders group. Engineers. Now, this one's a pretty clear gap if one limits it strictly to engineers in general, but the gap between Sanders and, say, the quintessential PMC aesthetic Buttigieg becomes massive when one looks at software engineers. This is a fact a good time to point out that Sanders has a massive lead in donations from those who work in technology fields, and that isn't just by looking at people who work on the customer services side. He leads among software developers and programmers and the tech industry, period. He leads in donations from the FAANG companies, the biggest tech companies in America. And this isn't predicated simply on leading in donations like from, say, the people who work on the warehouse floor of Amazon. Of Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and Google, only in Netflix does Bernie not lead everyone in the 2020 race, Trump included, despite his monopoly over those who would donate to a Republican candidate. Managers. Among managers, Sanders also leads all Democratic candidates. Now, a common argument of managers' position in professional managerial class is that fast food shift workers can technically count as managers, and they're obviously not PMC. But I'm sorry, office managers, program managers, and project managers are not that type of manager, and Bernie leads in those professions as well. Those who list themselves simply as management, presumably upper management, which wouldn't even really be PMC but a step above it, are led by Buttigieg, though Bernie outperforms Warren even here. Nurses. Among nurses, registered nurses, and nurse practitioners, Bernie Sanders leads in donations. Now, of course, this is another field in which there'll be argument as to their status as PMC, but I'm operating off of their relationship to capital, and Sanders has been ahead in all but one of the previously listed categories, in which he was a close second. Middle-level administrators. I'll say this goes to Pete Buttigieg. While Sanders leads with paralegals, Buttigieg leads with consultants, marketing, accounting, finance, bankers, investment bankers, and financial advisors. The single strongest argument against the idea that Sanders is not in fact the candidate with the strongest PMC support is that Buttigieg leads him in donations from these middle-level administration jobs, which might be portrayed as being the most PMC of all these professions mentioned here. However, it should be noted that even here, even among the arch professional managerial class, Sanders outperforms Warren, and if one concludes that the other 6 categories as being PMC, and in all those cases Buttigieg is more or less a third, he most definitely leads those 2 with the PMC as a whole. Now, to address the notion that we can't look at donations to get an accurate assessment of which candidate the professional managerial class supports the most, because, say, not everyone donates, either due to a lack of motivation or a lack of disposable income. This critique, however, assuming it is anyway valid, would only serve to strengthen the larger point. The assertion that those who see the PMC as a class that is inherently hostile to leftists operate assuming that at their core, when you deal with a truly politically aware, class-conscious member of the professional managerial class, when you put them under pressure, so to speak, they will show their true colors, and they'll oppose the left. Yet, it is only the most politically conscious, invested people that ultimately donate to a political campaign. So even if we stipulate that it is true that Warren or Buttigieg might have more professional managerial class supporters, they clearly lack the investment to donate as the professional managerial class members that support Sanders do. Ultimately, the core argument over the professional managerial class on the left is determining their class character by understanding who they will support when put through the crucible. So, Sanders having disproportionately motivated professional managerial class support discredits the notion that they're inherently anti-leftist at their core. The question of disposable income affecting the ability to donate also backs the larger point of this video, as assuming that higher disposable income makes you more likely to donate, and those in the professional managerial class that are more truly professional managerial class are the ones with a higher disposable income, that Bernie has stronger professional managerial class support than the other candidates. To finish off, Sanders having more support of the motivated members of the professional managerial class than the other candidates do in no way precludes him having a larger larger amount of his base being working class than other candidates. However, the purpose of this video was never to discredit the authenticity of Sanders' traditional working class support, but to attack this rubbish notion that I believe originates from the professional managerial class's own self-hatred, that somehow it is inherently, by its class character, opposed to leftism. Now, saying that runs contrary to the narrative you'll hear almost anywhere else, but that's exactly what it is, a narrative that doesn't appear to, at least at present, have a material base. Now, this is why it's necessary to build a new narrative that explains this material reality, but I think that should be left for another video, and it's one that's definitely worth its own. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.